Can a single circuit change the narrative of a whole season? Ferrari has surprised the world dominating practices in Monaco, but is this an indication of a real resurrection or simply another false hope in the streets of the Principality? In Formula One, Monaco represents the epitome of the technical and mental challenge. A circuit that requires millimeter precision, where the slightest error is paid with an abandonment, and where the barriers do not forgive. In this scenario where history and pressure converge, Ferrari hit the table in the free practices of the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix. What was lived that Friday was more than a good performance. It was a demonstration of character, a tactical and technical claim against a season until then plagued by ups and downs. Charles Leclerc, born and raised in the Principality, assumed a role that seemed written for him, that of undisputed leader. Since the beginning of the FP1, it was clear that the Monégasque not only felt comfortable in the narrow streets of Monte Carlo, but also had a car that, for the first time in a long time, responded to its demands. However, this domain narrative did not develop without turbulence. Just in his installation return, Leclerc suffered a block that forced him to make a reverse maneuver in the Mirabeau-Haute area, evidencing the initial balance problems of the SF-25, a car that has been criticized harshly for its instability in urban and technical circuits. But the turning point of the session came minutes later. In a situation that combined bad luck and lack of synchronization, Leclerc hit the back of Aston Martin de Lance Stroll. The Canadian tried to depart to give way to Kimi Antonelli, but did not warn that Leclerc was launched just behind. The result was a contact that forced the change of front wing at the Ferrari and generated a red flag. In other circumstances, this could have sentenced the day for any other pilot. But Leclerc, driven by his audience and the desire to redeem himself in his native circuit, returned to the track with a remarkable determination. Mounted on soft tires C6, Monégasque transformed frustration into rhythm. Each return was a statement. Their times began to descend consistency until it marked an imposing 1:11,964, enough to close the FP1 at the top. But the most intriguing was not the time itself, but how it achieved it. Overcoming persistent balance problems that caused the car to have subviring in the curves on the right and survive in the curves on the left. A situation that would normally prevent maximum performance, but that Leclerc managed to mitigate with adjustments in his driving style, anticipated braking, correcting with the steering wheel and managing the delivery of power with a millimeter sensitivity. On the other side of the garage, Lewis Hamilton had a less dramatic session, but equally illustrative. The British, still adapting to SF-25 in his first season with Ferrari, showed flashes of the old school. His approach was more conservative, more focused on simulating career rhythm than on looking for times back. Even so, it was provisionally positioned among the fastest with middle tires, which indicated that Ferrari had not only speed in a lap, but also a solid base for the long batch. A no less fact if the Monaco GP is considered, although difficult to advance, is also one with strategy and consistency. This first act was not just a surprise for fans or analysts. It was an internal signal for Ferrari. Tangible evidence that, at least in Monaco, SF-25 can be competitive. The question then was not if Ferrari could go quickly in Monaco. That had already been answered. The unknown that was floating was whether this performance could be maintained, replicated, and transformed into solid results during the rest of the weekend. Because in Formula One, a great practice is just that, practice. The real test was yet to come. The second part of this story in Monaco not only reinforces Ferrari's leading role during Friday, but also raises the conversation to a more technical and strategic level. This is where the true complexity of what Maranello's team achieved. Because dominating a training session may be due to a well-achieved return, to a fortunate configuration, even to changing track conditions that circumstantially benefit a car. But maintaining that domain, adjust and optimize it between sessions speaks of something deeper. A total understanding of the car and an ability to quickly adapt to the variables of one of the most technical circuits in the calendar. The work between the FP1 and the FP2 was key. Ferrari, aware of the problems that Leclerc had reported on radio, that delicate imbalance between subviring in the curves on the right and surviving in those of the left, did not limit himself to replacing the damaged aileron. The team worked integrally on the SF-25. It was not about looking for the perfect adjustment for each curve, because that is practically impossible in a path as unique as Monaco. It was rather to find a compromise configuration that gave the pilot confidence, allowing him to attack the key areas of the circuit without fear of a sudden loss of adhesion. This optimization strategy paid off almost immediately. Leclerc came out in the FP2 with a visibly more stable, more predictable car, and that was reflected in its rhythm from the first turns. Although the conditions of the track had also improved, the quality jump was evident. It lowered its own reference time to 1:11.355, consolidating its place at the top of the classifier. But beyond time, what caught attention was his consistency in the fast laps. Leclerc was not just trying to beat the stopwatch in a magical return. He was establishing a sequence of fast laps, indicating that the SF-25 could be not only fast, but also sustainable in rhythm, a critical element for the race. At the same time, Lewis Hamilton's approach complemented the narrative of technical progress. Its role, more analytical, less explosive in terms of times, was vital for the collection of degradation data, tire temperature and car behavior with different fuel loads. Hamilton, with his vast experience, contributed a different reading from the car, one that probably influenced the configuration settings between sessions. He even had time to experience the limits of the SF-25, as it was clear when his car was completely on the curb chicane, a moment that captured everyone's attention and that reflected both the aggressiveness and the precision with which he was driving. From the wall, Ferrari engineers faced the challenge of synthesizing the information of two pilots with such different styles and adapting it to a circuit that penalizes any error. They chose to maintain a relatively neutral tuning, something unusual in Monaco, where every millimeter of angle or rigidity can make the difference between success and the wall. This approach allowed both Leclerc and Hamilton to find their respective comfort margins within the same car, a feat that speaks of the operational evolution of the equipment since past seasons, where this type of flexibility was unthinkable. This second act, then, is not only the story of two consecutive sessions led by Ferrari. It is the portrait of a team that, for the first time in a long time, seems to be understanding not only how to take performance from its car in ideal conditions, but also how to react quickly when circumstances change. Adaptability, precise reading of the environment and surgical execution on the track. This has built not only Sunday victories but the basis of a winning project. The question that remains in the air is whether this adaptability will be sustained beyond Monaco, in scenarios where the margin of error is not so technical, but strategically diverse. The FP2 was not simply a continuation of the performance seen in the FP1, it was a declaration of consistency that in Formula One, especially in a circuit like Monaco, represents much more than a good session. It means that the team has managed to read the data correctly, adjust the car to the changing conditions, and that, above all, it has found a solid technical basis on which to build the rest of the weekend. In this context, what Ferrari did in the FP2 was more than reaffirming his domain. It was to demonstrate that there was a logic behind his speed, a work structure that worked, and a car that finally responded predictably to the demands of his pilots. Charles Leclerc was, once again, the epicenter of this narrative. His SF-25 confidence not only grew, but also manifested with a calculated aggressiveness that is rarely seen in Friday sessions. While other pilots used the FP2 to refine details or practice long batches, Leclerc used each round as a classification simulation, seeking not only to make a difference in the stopwatch, but also press the car to the limit to check the reliability of the adjustments made. His best time of 1:11,355 was not a product of chance. It was the result of a perfect execution of a lap in which all the elements converged. Optimal tire temperature, clear traffic, and a tuning that finally aligned with its piloting style. The interesting thing here is that Ferrari did not adopt a conservative strategy after the good result in FP1. On the contrary, instead of protecting what has won, the team decided to push even more in search of additional information. They changed suspension parameters, evaluated new differential configurations, and explored different fuel loads to verify how the car responded in simulations of different career phases. This denotes a team that no longer acts by instinct or reaction, but for anticipated analysis and long-term planning. And in modern Formula One, that makes the difference between being on the podium or outside the points. For his part, Hamilton also showed signs of progression. Although his name did not head the timetable, his contribution was fundamental. He used the FP2 to continue its adaptation to the car in conditions of high aerodynamic load and dense transit, a constant element in the narrow streets of Monaco. His rhythm in long batches was consistent, and although he did not explode in pure speed, his comments on radio revealed a better tune with the behavior of the SF-25, especially in the slow and technical sections. The learning curve continues to rise, but the indications of improvement are there and are tangible. On a technical level, Ferrari engineers made key decisions in the FP2 that reflect a more flexible and less dogmatic work philosophy. During the session, the car heights and rakes values were adjusted between the front and rear height to evaluate the effect on curve, a crucial appearance in Monaco. They also performed motor maps comparisons, something that indicates that they are exploring all possible variables to maximize power delivery on a track where each tenth is vital. This third act, therefore, is not just a confirmation. It is a redefinition of Ferrari present. What in other seasons would have been a statistical anomaly or a blow of circumstantial luck, here begins to take the form of coherent project. The FP2 not only reinforces what is seen in the FP1, but gives it credibility. He shows that Ferrari is not just trying luck, he is executing a plan. And that plan, at least in Monaco's context, seems to be working. It remains to be seen if this performance translates into a solid and, more important, classification in a race without errors. Because in Formula One, the difference between claim and disappointment is always at a distance curve. What Ferrari showed in the free practices of the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix was not a chance or a simple sparkling of isolated talent. It was a clear demonstration that even in a season full of uncertainties and technical challenges, there are still moments capable of redefining the course of a championship. Charles Leclerc's performance in particular, and the team in general, not only revives hope in a team that has been desperately looking for a competitive identity, but also raises a series of crucial questions about the immediate future of the season. Because yes, Ferrari dominated training. Yes, they found balance. Yes, they were the fastest. But Monaco is a unique track. It is not representative of the global calendar. Its technical nature, its dependence on the pilot's confidence, and the difficulty of advancing makes this race a completely atypical scenario. So, the big question is, can Ferrari replicate this performance in more conventional circuits? Has this domain been a strategic exception based on the peculiarity of the layout? Or are we facing the real scudding awakening under a new technical and operational approach? What happened in these practices should also be seen as a character test for Ferrari. In recent years, the team has been criticized for its inability to capitalize good weekend beginnings. The poles do not translate into victories. Good strategies fade under pressure. This weekend, therefore, it cannot simply be an exercise of momentary satisfaction. It has to be a turning point. A concrete example that they can start up, stay up, and end up. Because the current Formula One does not forgive inconsistency. Each point counts, each error is paid. And Monaco, despite his glamour, remains a technical jungle that does not allow truces. And now it's your turn. What do you really think of Ferrari's performance in these practices? Do you think they have found the key to turning their season?